The Chargers last year in LA. They did not win one game from the East Coast after that. Not one. The complete East Coast. Not a huge, like a indie. It's like you're killing me, guys. They're in Seattle. I'll do it if I can get two. I won't go to just single game. Usually I'll do a ride. Like go to get there the day before and see a game, stay the week.
Okay, we have about 30 seconds. Deputy Mayor, when you hear the recording announcement, that's your cue to begin.
Okay.
Ten seconds.
Okay, so it is Tuesday, July 9th at 6 o'clock, and I will call this City of Lacey Council work session to order. Before we begin, our Mayor Ryder is absent tonight, and we have one council member attending remotely, Councilmember Stedman. And I'll read our land acknowledgement before we get into approving our agenda. We, the City of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian Tribe and the Squaxin Indian Tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today who were absorbed or relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants who are still here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as the traditional stewards of this land since time immemorial, and their role today in taking care of these lands in perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the histories of dispossession, forced removal, and abridged treaty rights that allowed our nation, state, and city to develop as they have today. We recommend that the community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854. And with that, can I please get an agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as published.
Some motion to approve the agenda. It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion about tonight's agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
There are none opposed. That motion passes unanimously. The first item on our agenda tonight is the intercity transit roundabout at Martin Way and Meridian. Our speaker is going to be the Development Director of Intercity Transit, Peter Stackpole. Also joining us is Martin Hoppy. Hi, Martin.
Hi.
Floor is yours, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Let me share my screen here, and I appreciate you accommodating me remotely this evening.
No problem.
All right, are you able to see the screen?
No.
Not yet.
No.
There it is.
Got it.
Okay, great. 1 second here. All right, thank you very much. My name is Peter Stackpole, and I am the Development Director at Intercity Transit. Here tonight to talk to you about the roundabout project at Martin Way and Meridian, or officially known as the Northeast Lacey Operational Transit Terminal. So tonight I just wanted to discuss with you the purpose and the funding for the project, discuss a little bit about why this location was chosen, some of the activities to date, what we've heard from the public, the expanded scope based on that feedback we received from the public, and then answer any questions that you might have. So the purpose of this project was to establish a turnaround facility and terminus to support high capacity transit service along Martin Way, and also serve to support other speed and reliability treatments planned in the corridor. Funding for the project was received through a combination of the state's bus and bus facility grant program, as well as the FTA's carbon reduction program. And the federal grants were awarded in a competitive regional process through Thurston Regional Planning Council in 2022. And total funding for this phase of the project is roughly $798,000. This is a conceptual drawing that was submitted with the grant application back in 2022. It was also part of a presentation I made to the ITA, the Intercity Transit Authority, back in February. And this graphic was subsequently picked up by the Journal of Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater. And I think the graphic created some confusion because readers thought that the design was finalized and poised to be built without any analysis or public participation. And that certainly wasn't the case. We only received funding for the first phase of the project, which I will discuss in a little bit. But I did want to touch a little bit on why this particular location, the intersection of Martin Way and Meridian, was chosen for this project. And, the Martin Way corridor accounts for roughly 30% of total system ridership. As a matter of fact, it's approaching closer to 40% of total system ridership across all intercity transit services. It's also has our most robust frequency in the corridor with 15-minute service, and it's poised to receive some incentives in terms of high capacity transit, or what we're terming as BRT Light, which would be a high performance, high frequent service operating in the corridor with speed and reliability treatments also planned in the corridor. Some of those are already existing, including transit signal priority, which we would look to expand to other intersections, and other items like transit queue jumps at intersections, and then the potential for some business access travel lanes at certain points in the corridor. And really what it boils down to is the cost of transit frequency is a very significant consideration when we looked at how we wanted to operate in the corridor. There have been some suggestions that we maybe turn around at the roundabout on Orion or continue down to Nisqually. And that is really cost prohibitive when we think of the amount of frequency that is planned for the corridor. We really want to optimize the transit schedules to ensure that the buses and other transit vehicles can maintain consistent and reliable frequency. So truncating in the urban corridor allows us to also redeploy resources that we save, and redeploy those resources to other areas where perhaps less frequency is warranted. So extending the route without a corresponding demand can be very costly. So there is that cost savings that comes with efficiency. I added this slide, and I apologize, this wasn't part of your packet, but I pulled some demographic data that I just wanted to show here. And so this really represents the eastern terminus of the urbanized corridor that really focuses where we want to focus on that high level of frequency. So you can see from the top, have both population and employment density here. And the blue line extending to the north is the Meridian section, and the red arrow pointing directly to this intersection. You can see that east and north, the amount of density in terms of both population and employment really starts to diminish as we reach beyond that. So if we extend the route beyond this intersection, there's the operational cost of adding more buses and operators to maintain that level of frequency and maintain the schedule adherence. And in doing so, it's not just thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it can equate to millions of dollars a year by adding more buses and more operators just to maintain that frequency without seeing that corresponding demand in ridership by extending beyond that point. And I'm not insinuating that we shouldn't look at other locations or that a roundabout is necessarily the way to go, but that by not doing some sort of treatment at this intersection, there could be a very significant financial impact. So I wanted to touch a little bit on what the actions have been to date, and the Intercity Transit Authority at the February 7th meeting authorized our general manager to enter into a contract with our consultants to initiate phase one, which would cover all the items that you see on this slide. I did put a red line in there to denote that really we're just kicking off those first 3 bullet points in this process, and that anything design related below the red line can't happen until we do our due diligence in tackling this first analysis component. So the project would ultimately be 3 phases: the preliminary engineering and design phase, where we are right now, and then phase 2 would be right-of-way acquisition, and then phase 3 would be construction. And I did want to point out that no construction funding has been authorized at this point. We have not sought any construction funding, and we wouldn't do so until we get through this first analysis phase, which would put us at the next call for projects, which is quite a ways down the road. I think that would be, since the most recent call for projects is coming out, would put us about 2 years from now. And again, another slide I need to apologize for because this is unreadable, but I did want to point out that this is the phase 1 schedule, and the red line denotes where we are right now. So we're really in the infancy of this project, and this schedule covers roughly to around the same time frame in 2025 to complete phase 1. And this schedule is likely to be extended because we are expanding the scope.
Peter?
Yes.
If things go completely to plan, what is the completion target on that timeline?
Oh, the completion would be probably roughly somewhere, if a roundabout was feasible or some other treatment and we were to go out for construction funding, we're looking at probably 2028 for construction.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I apologize, I can't see hands, so if you can just let me know if there's a question, I'm happy to answer as I move along, but I will save some time at the end to answer questions as well. And then I wanted to touch a little bit on the consultant activities to date, and really these 3 items are all that have been done in terms of deliverables. The first being a cultural impacts exemption memo. And because we're working in the built environment, it's likely to have minimum or no impacts to cultural resources. We have submitted a geotechnical categorical exclusion worksheet, which is under review. And in working with the county, we are doing some, well, we have done some preliminary traffic counts on Ridgeview and Martin at the right turn in and out of Windsor Lane, at Deutero and Northwood, and at the driveways at the apartment and gas station on Meridian Northeast. And we pushed these up because we wanted those done before school was out, just so we were able to capture those higher volumes of traffic that are associated with school being in session.
Have you taken into account that on that corner, there's a whole new development going in as well?
Yes, absolutely. The traffic counts we're doing are going to account for not only the existing traffic, but all future development that's occurring there. Yes, thank you for pointing that out. And I wanted to touch a bit on the community feedback that we've received. We have received a significant amount of feedback, mostly from the Ridgeview 1 and Ridgeview 2 communities, as well as some from the Nisqually Bluff community. We have received testimony at public meetings, letters, emails, a petition with 101 signatures on it. These have been made part of both the public record for this project and as part of Intercity Transit's Transit Improvement Program testimony. The concerns largely focus on the ingress and egress to Martin Way from Ridgeview. There were also concerns about traffic platooning with the roundabout versus a traditional signalized intersection. The potential for accidents, especially among drivers unfamiliar with roundabout operations. Visual obstructions during the uphill travel towards the roundabout, access to businesses on or adjacent to the intersection, as well as the availability of other potential turnaround locations, which I mentioned earlier. So based on this feedback, we have expanded the scope to consider some other treatments that allow a transit turnaround. That would leave the existing intersection intact, and we would review those and score those in terms of safety, traffic operations, the environmental impacts, right-of-way impacts, financial feasibility, and stakeholder support. So we are looking at other locations for an eastern terminus for high-capacity transit. And as I mentioned earlier, we have to really weigh the cost of building something versus the operational cost of extending the route. We are expanding the traffic analysis and traffic counts, and we are increasing the public outreach and stakeholder engagement. I will point out that there was already a robust community and public outreach feedback built into part of the plan, but because the feedback we received from the Ridgeview community, we wanted to do a bit more targeted outreach directly to that community and engage them and have them be part of this process as we move forward. I did mention some other treatments we will be looking at, and I wanted to at least provide a conceptual design of what that could potentially be. These are at this point very preliminary, but one potential option could be a transit U-turn that would move a transit-only lane just adjacent to the right turn lane, and that would be in conjunction with the corresponding transit signal that would allow buses to make a U-turn ahead of any general purpose traffic signal. It would make a U-turn and then serve a transit facility or bus stop in the westbound direction. And again, this is one alternative that would allow us to review it against the other options and do an evaluation matrix for the pre-design analysis. And, it would be between do nothing, which would be leaving the signal and the intersection configuration as is, or doing a roundabout or a reconfigured signal that allows U-turns such as this. And again, just to move back, those would be scored against these items bulleted in that first item in that expanded scope. And really that covers everything that I had for today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So the main goal is to get the buses heading back in the other direction. And how are they doing that right now? Like, is that the main goal to get the buses, the buses that are, I guess, heading northbound, heading southbound again, even though it kind of feels east and west, getting them going back to the other direction with as minimal interruption as possible, right?
Yes, yeah. And what they're doing right now is our 62A and B take a kind of circuitous route northbound, and it adds about 20 minutes each direction, and it also only allows a one-way loop on Martin Way, so it turns at an earlier intersection, does its route north, and then comes down and only covers the westbound direction at a certain point.
But couldn't they use the roundabout there at north at Meridian to turn around and do pretty much the same thing? I know it's a one-lane roundabout and it might be tight for buses, but is that not an option?
No, it is an option and one we're potentially looking at. But again, you run the risk of the operational impacts of extending a route down a road that has very little transit demand, and then the nuances of turning a 40-foot coach in a smaller roundabout. And over the course of a year, that becomes significant in terms of the operational dollars required to do so. But it is something we are evaluating.
I saw the bus U-turn concept.
Mhm.
I think this is probably my first time seeing that. Is that in operation somewhere or is that?
No, I mean, not in our service area. There are other transit agencies throughout the United States that do a U-turn option. Again, the design I showed you is very conceptual, and there are, of course, safety issues involved there. So it has to be reviewed by the county, because when you have a bus only signal, of course, you run the potential of once traffic in the adjacent lane see a bus moving, they might ignore a red signal and move on ahead. So all that has to be evaluated in terms of both operational efficiency and the safety aspect.
Yeah, I feel like something that would have to be utilized throughout the community, and they would have to know that this is a common.
Yeah, there would certainly be a learning curve.
So from time to time, because of freeway backups, we've seen the traffic back up so far, like almost all the way to the top of the hill, from down there in Nisqually. It doesn't happen that often, though, does it? Yeah. It
Happens more than you think.
yeah, because it like literally backs up all the way to like Texaco sometimes.
When I-5 traffic is really bad and people are trying to
People get
save
off.
time
Get to exit
going up that
114.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be.
Peter, could you background us a little bit on why Intercity Transit is undertaking this project rather than asking the county or the state?
Yeah, that is a great question, and it's not typical that a transit agency would take on a road project like this. I think it came down to the need and the funding. So we had a more immediate need than the county did, and we were able to get the funding to do it. So we were able to be successful in getting the grant for the project. And another thing, we saw our neighbors to the north at Pierce Transit get stymied. Their BRT project was put on hold, and a big part of that was the demand to have roundabouts put in, but they didn't have the funding to do so. So jurisdictions were demanding that roundabouts be part of the project, but they didn't have the funding to do so. So I think it was kind of a preemptive measure to make sure that we had the ability to add it in there for a bus turnaround. And we were working with both the support of the county and Lacey and the TRPC, getting support for the project as a whole. But yeah, it's a great question. It's certainly not unheard of, but certainly not typical that a transit agency would undertake a roadway project like this.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions or comments from the council? Okay, well, thank you for your presentation. Martin, did you have anything to add on this one?
I was just gonna here for support.
Okay.
Thanks, Martin.
Okay, well, thank you for your presentation, and we look forward to seeing how this might turn out in the near future.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Next on our agenda, thank you, Martin. Next on our agenda is a 2024 Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan update. We have the Benefits Manager, Bracy. I don't want to butcher your last name, Bracy. Leonardo. And Ed Taylor, the Emergency Management and Safety Coordinator. Hello. How are you today?
Good. So we have a presentation. That's something John is, or nothing else.
You just want to share it like you're on Zoom?
What's that?
You're gonna share it like you're on Zoom?
You can share button, no pop. Oh, okay. I don't know how to use this, so
Oh, there it is.
sweet.
I think you actually did a
yeah.
different button, so let me help you out here.
I did something wrong.
On her drive.
Cool. Thank you. So much. All right, so I wanted to present to you guys the comprehensive emergency management plan that we have completed. So I hit something again. This one here.
There you go.
There we go. That's slideshow.
No, it's a different one.
That's yeah. There we go. Okay, so start out with, we had hired a consultant to help us update the comprehensive emergency management plan. We interviewed the top 4 consultants. We scored them, had a scoring matrix that we put together, and we interviewed the top 4. Whit O'Brien's was selected as the emergency management consultant. We then moved forward and we conducted several workshops with them and had approximately 30 employees representing all the departments within the city. And we also had regional partners and community partners because we wanted it to be a whole community planning event for our CMP. So some people ask, what is a CMP? So a comprehensive emergency management plan it defines who does what, when, where, and how during a disaster or, any human caused disaster, disaster or emergency. So the CMP itself, it describes the basic assumptions, strategies, and our operational objectives for coordination of the response to an emergency or a disaster. So the city will mobilize resources and conduct activities to support protection, response, recovery, prevention, mitigation, operations for natural and human caused hazards. It was important for what I keep hitting on the side, sorry. It was important for the senior leaders to have a senior leader's intent of how we would manage this. And their intent was to help save lives, alleviate suffering, ensure the continuity of critical government functions, maintain and restore the essential services, and help stabilize and repair critical infrastructure, and help to create an environment conducive to short and long-term recovery and future mitigation. It was really important to add the short and long-term recovery into that for our community. So the plan consists of, in the past, we've had a basic plan with a ESF, emergency support function plan, which it spells out the different emergency support functions. We changed it because we feel that the city does things departmentally. And it really didn't make sense for us to stay with an emergency support function because we couldn't fulfill all those emergency support functions. So we were going outside of that anyways. So we changed it to an agency style departmental focus plan. The comprehensive emergency management plan is updated every 5 years. And like I said, it consists of the basic plan, which tells us how we're going to respond and what we're going to do, who's going to respond, what departments, where and when and how. And then it goes into some annexes. So in the basic plan, it addresses our planning assumptions, what we're going to do after the emergency. It talks about the strategies of what we're going to do, the specified and implied tasks, the operational objectives and priorities, which are usually for life-saving and property preservation. And then it also spells out our training and exercise program so that we are training and exercising our employees and making sure that we know the plan and that we're able to use the plan. In the annexes, there are 7 annexes right now, and it can expand, but right now we have the first annex is our damage assessment annex, which it goes through our initial response, looking at damage assessments, looking at windshield assessments, things like that, to get a quick idea of what's going on in the emergency or the disaster. Our Annex B covers all of our mass care. So there's mass care, there's sheltering and things like that. It's not totally planned out, but it's a start to what we're planning on working, and we're working with Thurston County as well on part of that mass care plan. The Annex D is Annex C is our search and rescue. Annex D is our evacuation, spells out how we would evacuate. Annex E is our transition to recovery, because we want to make sure that we not only are in the response phase, but then we are transitioning to that recovery also for our citizens. And like I say, there's a short-term recovery that we will start right away, and then we will plan into a longer phase recovery as well. But we need to know how to transition that and how that takes effect.
So some of the items, I mean, obviously, for just search and rescue, for example.
Yeah.
Is this something that like, do we have enough search and rescue people to cover such a thing? Cause I don't.
No, so what it does is it spells out our search and rescue planning. So basically our police are responsible, police and fire. It's an active teamwork on that, but they do not actually, the fire does some building collapse searches, things like that, rescue stuff, but that's gonna come from the fire department, probably special operations sort team, the rescue team. And then the actual search and rescue, when we talk about a missing person or urban search and rescue, we would call in resources from the county. And if we need to, we would always call up to the county emergency management to fulfill any gaps or capabilities that we can't meet. So in the search and rescue plan, that's what we would most likely do, but it spells out who in the initial phases are gonna be involved in the search and rescue. So we have a plan going into it.
Right.
Yeah. And then it talks about the roles and responsibilities by department too. So which departments are doing what during the emergency. We have, mass, as we said, the mass care, the damage assessment, so CED would be part of that. Mass care would be part of our Parks and Recs function as well. So there's different departments are identified inside the CEN plan. And then the Annex G is our definitions, because everybody loves all the FEMA terms and definitions, so we have a definition in there as well. This, I'm sorry, I wish it was down below that, but this is, slide that. Can I? Could I just grab up to the top and slide it down? Yep. The bar, oops. Okay.
Oh, the menu bar.
Menu bar. Oh, okay. See if I can get back. This one? Yep. And I can maybe just pull it down? Yeah, you should be able.
Oh, you can drag it
There
down.
we go. I don't know what I keep hitting on this thing. There we go. Sorry about that.
Yeah, there's a little button by your left thumb, over your right thumb.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm.
Yeah, that's.
Okay, sorry about that. So I wanted to show you this slide because this portrays the org chart, the ECC, our emergency community, our emergency coordination center, the org chart, and it talks about, or it shows you from the city manager goes down to the ECC manager, who controls everything under that. But what was important, I wanted to show you is where the policy group sits, and that's directly talking to the mayor, and the policy decisions is off to the side. So the city council, city manager, the mayor, and city attorney, off the side of the city manager, would all be involved in that box, the policy group for decisions. And then we have, goes down from there, public affairs, liaisons, ECC coordinator or safety officer. Then it goes on to the operations, the planning, logistics, finance and administration, and the recovery if needed. So if we needed to, like I talked about transitioning to recovery, at that point, we could stand down a good part of this and then stand up a recovery position as well. So we're moving into that recovery phase. So the council's roles and responsibilities, I really wanted to point this out because I thought it would be important for, people that are you guys to kind of know what your roles and responsibilities in this are. So sir, first off, you do fall under the policy group and for the response, making policies and decisions responsible for the declaration of conditions of the emergency or disasters when control of the situation is beyond the capabilities of the city. So starts to go beyond that, we declare an emergency or declaration of emergency, and then that will be sent, once we do that declaration, a signed copy of that gets sent over to the county, and then it gets filed with the state. So that's what kicks in to start us to be able to get other resources or funding capabilities. That's really important. And then also during the protection part, the city council would serve as a policy group responsible for plan adoptions, participate in training and exercises. We need you guys to participate in our training and exercises as well. And then in the response phase would serve on the policy group, like I already talked, make policy decisions, support the emergency proclamation with a resolution. The recovery phase, it's making and determining for approving additional financial support if we need it. And then making determination on amending the emergency policies or amending the municipal code if we need to expedite decision-making processes. So with that, the next steps that we're asking is that, and we'll be coming back to the council meeting and asking for a resolution to adopt the comprehensive emergency management plan and the annexes. So do you guys have any questions for me?
Sure.
Um,
HR has.
So how does the council participate in the training exercises? Like, when are those held? How can we participate?
That's to be determined when are they gonna be held, but they would be some tabletop exercises, of course, and probably full scale. And
Like
we would,
Cascadia Rising level stuff, or just on a local city level?
more than likely to begin with on a city level, but it's gonna be, so we start out small with drills and exercises and things like that, and then we'll move up. And that's kind of spelled out in our training. Or our MyTEP, which is being completed now. We're still in that process of completing that.
Yeah, that leads me to my question of, okay, so training, and now we're talking about training all department heads, several staff, all of the council.
Yeah.
And how long is something like that gonna typically take? I mean, let's skip past the continuing education portion, just the initial training portion.
So the initial training starts out with basically your ICS trainings and such as that. And then we move on. Training, as we're talking about, is gonna be your roles and responsibilities training, which is gonna be targeted to what you do in the ECC. And then also would be doing drills and going through how we do things in the ECC or what your role is. So it's going through the roles and responsibilities through that. There will be, like I said, we'll start out with like drills, exercises. We don't want to move into just throwing you to the wolves and going into a exercise that nobody knows how to do anything.
So in terms of timeline, are you
It's
thinking
gonna
like 6
be-
months to a year, 12 to 18?
Yeah, 12 to 18 at least.
18
So at MyTEP, when we do our multi-year training and exercise program, we also put in there, it runs a 5-year cycle. Okay, so we kind of are starting to identify what we can do. And some of that, because it is a little extensive, it's gonna take us a little bit of time. It's gonna take us a couple of years to develop that. But if we don't start somewhere, yes.
If I may, some of the council members probably aren't aware, but a few years ago, we had that FEMA grant where we all went to Ocean Shores for, what it was, 3 or 4 days. And, I looked at it like on a smaller scale of like 9/11 event with Mayor Giuliani addressing the public, telling people where they could, coordinating people for services, food, shelter, stuff like that. But there is, a lot of our staff was there. I know, The Parks Department was there, Jen Burbage, with the director, Rick was there. Nearly every department was represented through all the cities in the county. And it was really good training, but that was several years ago. So we have some training, but I mean, like you said, just continue to do it and get better educated.
Yeah, so kind of,
I say, what would be the most likely large scale emergency or disaster that we would face here?
Cascadia 9.0 earthquake is gonna be our biggest threat right now.
But not a major flooding or severe weather?
No, we
event?
do not have we do not have a huge flooding problem here, very, very minor. So do you remember here a couple months ago when I did the I don't know if you were here, when I did the presentation for hazard mitigation plan, that covered all of our hazards that we would see. And it's also covered in the CMP, talks about what our hazards are, what our medium, max, or our high threats are as well. They are covered in there.
Low level risk versus high level risk.
Yes.
When you did the workshops with the consultant and the community partners, I'm just curious what other partners were involved, like for instance, the hospital.
Yes, so we had intercity transit, we had North Thurston School District, we had did we have the hospital? We had them on the, I'm not sure if they came, if they were here.
But
There
they've
were
been
some
involved,
that,
some of them.
they were
okay.
invited, but I'm not, there were some that didn't come. But yeah, we tried to reach out to the whole community that would be involved. We had Thurston County Emergency Management. We tried to get a whole spectrum, PSE, we just tried to get.
Services?
Yep, Animal Services was part of that. They're part of our team too, so internal.
And just to add on to that too, and for instance, like when Multicare opened up their new facility there at Golf Club, they reached out to make sure we're coordinating emergency response. Same way with Providence, you know.
Yes, and I,
Darren Goss and I met and then we connected our.
Oh, great.
So,
and I work with Scott
You know,
Sutton.
the mass casualty side, obviously, we're gonna need.
Yeah,
there to
and
be
there's
more.
other outreach too, especially some of our larger employers in the industrial areas, because those would be potential supplies that would, in the big event, we're gonna need to figure out how we are able to access facilities and supplies as well.
So, and on that, we participate in the Thurston County Emergency Management Council. I am the chair of the council. We are very involved in coordinating our efforts with Thurston County, all the other cities, Tumwater, Olympia.
Got those relationships built.
Very good relationship, and it's really starting to.
That makes sense, because any major disaster is obviously not gonna be isolated to Lacey. We're all gonna be
Right.
affected by the same.
We're gonna
type
be
of
affected
disaster.
and, yeah, we're gonna have a hard time getting resources because we're small. I mean, it's, a lot of stuff's gonna go to Seattle, and so we need to build those relationships around us. We also build big relationships with Homeland Security 3, Region 3, which is Thurston County, Mason County, or Thurston, Lewis, Mason, Grace Harbor. So we have a lot of partners with that, and we've got a lot of interlocal agreements with different agencies too as well. So
And the new FEMA regional manager used to be a Lacey resident, and he's moved back to the area, obviously by taking this job. So, you know, we've had little, big events like the flooding in Centralia or the train derailment, and that's, you learn and you grow from those. So, you know, we're as best prepared as we possibly can, but professionals like we have here.
And like you mentioned, one of the biggest things is we need to keep training. We need to, if we don't, we won't be prepared, we won't be planned. And that's what the comprehensive emergency management plan is for.
You referenced, needing to wait for resources. If something big happens, like the Cascadia Rising exercise showed us that sometimes you might need to wait for up to 2 weeks. So in the plan, it says that Lacey residents might need to hunker down for 72 to 96 hours. Why the difference between like what we think might be necessary if a big earthquake happens versus what's in the plan?
So when we do outreach as emergency management, we talk about 2 weeks ready. We always tell the citizens and everything, plan to be 2 weeks ready. That 72, what was it again? 72, 96
to
hours.
96, yeah.
So that is what we will start to respond in. That's not when we can expect to
Help
be able to
from
help
FEMA
everybody.
or
We still teach them, it's gonna be 2 weeks. It
water,
could be,
animal food,
Yes,
medication, all
yes.
those things for up to
but
2
we're gonna
weeks.
start bringing, we're gonna we're gonna start the response right away. And that's what the comprehensive emergency management plan is to be able to start that plan with no delays and have it ready to go.
Looking for help,
Yeah.
bigger help.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've got some capability gaps that obviously we're moving forward as a city and we're getting big, but we got a lot of gaps that we need to fill. And that's what we're trying to do with this comprehensive emergency management plan.
Where do we keep printed copies of this plan?
Printed copies right now, I don't have.
Once it's final, I guess.
Oh, once it's final, I guess it would be, well,
We could produce the print
Yeah.
copies.
yeah, exactly.
Just thinking if we really need this plan, we might not have solid internet or
Oh,
electricity.
exactly. We will have printed plans. We will have the plans in print as well, not only just on our database. So,
That would be a shame.
yeah.
I have one more question.
Yeah,
And then I'll
please.
stop asking
No,
questions
please.
for now.
keep going. You're good.
Do we translate this plan or elements of this plan into some of the languages we have represented in the
That
community?
is the question.
That's a good question. That's something that I hadn't thought of yet, but that might be something that we should look into.
I
At
know
least
that,
the
like-
5% or more.
The whole detail might not be necessary, but the elements of like what our response looks
Right.
like in, Korean, Spanish, I think Vietnamese.
Yeah. Primary
And
languages
then
that we
also
have.
too, the information to how you shelter in place, what are the things.
Right,
that
right,
you
right.
Prepare and strike, those type of informational things. I think we'll be incorporating a lot of that into the language access programs going forward too.
And I know we do place this and the hazard mitigation plan on our website under the emergency management section. So it's there for the citizens to look at and read. So yeah, that's a thing we need to look at is definitely if we hit that mark of the 5% or whatever they say now is to put it into language.
Hey, guys.
Translation. Yes.
One thing that we can expand on as a city is what they're doing up in Jubilee is they have block captains. And then those captains, each area of that neighborhood has other captains, and at block by block, they're prepared and they're ready for that, week long or however long it takes for services to get back online and stuff. So we could expand that community wide, or citywide, regionally wide. They have all the groundwork in place. So all you have to do is copy it. We just have to find people in the neighborhoods that are willing to take on that work.
So let me expand on that a little bit. I work very closely with Epic, with Jubilee. Epic is the name of their
HOA manager.
yeah, we are reaching out to other HOAs very aggressively and I'm meeting with them all the time and giving them that information. And the state right now is actually putting together a new plan because that was Map Your Neighborhood.
Yep.
And that is no longer available. The person that wrote that decided they wanted money and the state said, no, we're not gonna do that. So they're doing a new plan right now. We should have that out in October. It's actually the 2 weeks ready. And I just met with the coordinator for Department of Emergency Management, that's the outreach coordinator, and she says it's really looking good and we should have that out by possibly October. So I'm really excited to be able to help push that out to neighborhoods and as well.
I don't know if
So-
we're still doing the meetings, Rick would know, but for a while, Jen was doing those meetings, Jenny was with the HOA forums.
Mhm.
That'd be probably a good
That's,
opportunity to share this with
yes.
people from a lot of the different
Yeah,
HOAs.
I
that come.
actually have
Faith-based community too.
I actually have done, gone to their workshop. They have an annual, workshop that they do. And I've been to that and I've been to some of and I've also been to a lot of faith-based. They'll contact us and we'll go to the faith-based organizations.
So yeah, there's two training and education programs we gotta look at. One, how we get the community prepared, and to know what to expect from us.
Sure.
But
And
also
us, our
for us
training,
in our organization, because we have 330 employees now. What are their responsibilities to do both for their home, family, and then
Yeah.
work reporting? So there's a lot of learning that we're gonna do. It's gonna take some time, as Ed said earlier. It could be, 18 months, but we're gonna set up that series and having this plan will be something that we can use as a guide to focus and continue that training, get sure we're as prepared as we can be.
Excellent.
Robin.
Can you look into the new Map Your Neighborhood or whatever it's gonna be called, getting it translated as well, because they.
Absolutely. I think the state is already looking at doing the translations on those, and that's something we had talked about.
Right.
So, but yeah, and that I would be interested to know what I'll work with public affairs on that to see what the language is that we might look at.
So last October, my agency hosted a CERT training
Mhm.
and we put a whole bunch of our employees through it and some other folks from other agencies as well. Is that ever something that we've thought about hosting as an opportunity for community members through our parks playbook?
So interestingly, I am also a DART member. I'm also a trainer, cert trainer, and I'm only one person in emergency management at the city of Lacey right now. But that is something I want to expand into, is start doing cert trainings for our citizens more. The fire department was doing that, but they just don't have the capacity to really push that out anymore. I do belong to like I said, DART, and we're doing local trainings a lot more, and we're gonna start doing more here within Lacey and all of Thurston County, but that's Thurston County. I really want to get that CERT team started, a sponsored CERT team, and also just to be able to do those CERT trainings out to the public. But
Not a trainer yet, but I'm trained.
yeah, so in October, there's a training at Thurston County if you're interested.
To be a trainer.
Yeah, so train a trainer and yeah.
Cool.
If you want the information, I could get that for you.
So 12 to 18 months worth of training
least,
and
yeah.
before we get to implementation. And of course, it's being done by resolution. So my question, is there a cost model that associates, for training a city of our size? I know trainers aren't free. And trainings themselves.
Actually,
do have some costs oftentimes, but I know that, when we've gone down to the emergency management down south and just off 93rd, Tilly Road. They were able to give us they didn't give us cost models, but I'm just kind of wondering, like, what is this gonna cost us potentially? I know that you can't put a price on saving lives, but I'm just kind of wondering.
our biggest costs are gonna be in our paying our employees. A lot of the trainings we can get done are gonna be done free through FEMA, but a lot of it is through the time invested
Okay,
in the
so
payment or, in the employee's time.
we're talking about FTE
Kind of-
overtime
well,
hours.
Not just overtime, it's making sure we can dedicate time for employees to get trained. As I said, there's a lot of resources that FEMA provides, either online video webinars or other type of trainings, but that's taking time away from their day-to-day normal functions. And that's the piece that we need to balance, and but we also need to be consistent in the importance of continuing this training.
And so being part of the Emergency Management Council and Homeland Security 3, we actually get grants and things that we use for training and things like that. So we have a lot of training monies through through the county and through Homeland Security Region 3 and FEMA 10. So there's a lot of things that we will get for free. There's some that we might have to pay for, but it's not a lot. Most of it's training that's paid for by grants and things through FEMA.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything on this subject? Is this something that's gonna be coming before the
That's the
council?
question, is with this briefing tonight and conversation, is council, we can have it ready for the resolution to be adopted or be considered by council action next week's council meeting, if the council is comfortable with that. Or we can have a further conversation too, if council would like to have further conversation.
I think we should keep going.
We're about ready. It was the next gen item that didn't have the full mission statement on.
No, yeah.
All right.
And so, but I want to thank Ed and his team and Bracy and Leilani for spearheading this effort. This is the first time we've, quite some time that we've been able to put together the full and update to our conference emergency management plan, but also it took the whole director team and key personnel throughout to put input into this process. So
How long did you work on
So
this?
important.
We've been working on it I had that slide in there, but since February.
Yeah.
Yeah, since February.
It's critical work though. I mean, it When it happens, or if it happens, to not be prepared would be disastrous. So I mean, preparation is critical.
Yeah, it is. We gotta start somewhere. and
Absolutely.
So how does,
Well on our way.
how does the new police station factor into this and how does the new police station factor into emergency management for the city of Lacey and how are we gonna use that space?
So there is, part of their training room is also gonna be used as a emergency coordination center. It's gonna be a dual purpose room. So that was set up through the design phase of that. So we'll have space to be able to do that there, but it's the dual purpose. So it's gonna be things stored away, and then if we need it, then we set up.
Sure.
Much needed space, because currently our designated room is
Yes.
community room.
Right.
And then of course we had upstairs, we had to use it for office space.
Yeah.
And then also too, we were able to get some, congressional direct spending for a generator to help support that under the FEMA dollars too.
Yeah, I
So,
remember that part.
What's the capacity of that new space, that the ECC?
I think Chief
Chief,
Amato would be better
yeah,
to answer that. Capacity of the space.
I'm sorry, you were saying?
the Emergency Coordination Center in the new police station.
It's going to be in the community room. It's dual purpose. It'll have, I saw the recommendations that came out of the last plan. They look reasonable to me based upon my knowledge of emergency management and my other work that I've done.
Is there a capacity, size?
The size capacity should be able to fulfill what the request is. I believe 35 lines is what I saw originally. And so 35 stations plus emergency radio. I think we talked about that as well. So yeah, we'll be able to staff it for coordination purposes. Also, so that'll be in the main station itself. That's built to essential building standards, so it'll withstand whatever come what may. And then the training center, which is built to commercial standards, should also frankly withstand most disasters. And that also has a lot of large contingency space as well. So we'll be able to move forward with it.
And that coupled with just generally the police station itself or police response. You also have Fire District 3, and we'd be looped in to coordinate with them. And of course, they've been involved in this planning operation, and then also links us to Thurston County Emergency Operations Center. So it creates this network. And one of the things the chief mentioned that it sometimes gets lost in this too. And if we do lose normal or typical today's communications, having coordination with ham radio, and that creates a spot that we can also set up a ham radio and operate and be able to communicate in that.
So if you were at the July 3rd festival, you saw a lot of ham radio out there. Those guys were everywhere. Everywhere I walked, I found them at all corners of the park. So they were out there working hard. I just got a text from the deputy chief, by the way, who is Johnny on the spot. 1,400 square feet for the community room. So thank you, deputy chief.
Thanks, DC.
Hey, one last- I sent a picture of this meeting, a link to Brett Fisher, the regional manager for FEMA in our area, and he sent a thumbs up. He's confident in the city of Lacey. He lived here for, man, I think almost 10 years. He's my next door neighbor. He's a good guy. Army OD, retired now, and that's what he's doing after he got his I think he got his doctorate, at least his master's. So
Wow.
anyway,
So
we're on it.
Oh, my mic might have got frozen. Okay, well, so this resolution, it probably won't cause us to make any kind of a budget amendment.
No, absolutely not.
All right, well, if you guys is everybody ready to move this on to full council?
Okay, so we'll have it scheduled for next week, and then of course, having this adopted, then we have to incorporate whatever dollars we need to apply for implementation through the budgeting process. So it's good timing.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you so much, Bracy, for your
President. Gracie is,
I'm sorry.
she's the one that's sitting over there that doesn't want to talk.
Doesn't want to come up.
You're right. Because I asked and I said, Leonardo.
Yeah,
So-
the second person on there. Ed.
You're Ed
Yeah.
Taylor. Sorry,
Yeah.
Ed.
No, that's okay.
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing that to us, and we'll get this on our next council agenda for adoption, and you'll be up and running.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Ed.
Yep.
He doesn't look like a Bracy.
I didn't see it pop up.
I gotta start generation stuff. Okay, next on our agenda, and our final agenda item is our diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging, DEIB strategic plan. Presenting, we have the Assistant City Manager, Shannon Kelly Fong, and Veronica, not Victoria. Okay, welcome you guys.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and council members. We're really excited to be here tonight to talk about the draft diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging strategic plan. I do want to point out, we also have Annie Clay here. Annie is the chair for the Commission on Equity, and as you will soon go through with this process, the Commission on Equity was instrumental in helping put together this draft plan as we have it for review today. So we've got a presentation. Please feel free to jump in and ask questions as we go along. So for tonight, the agenda is really just to overview the elements of the draft diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategic plan. And from now on, I'm going to be calling that the DEIB plan, just for the sake of shortening it, or maybe just the plan. The recommendation for tonight is just discussion, and really after this conversation, determining, if we need to have further discussion. So if you want us to come back at a future work session, if you want the Commission on Equity to look at other things and consider other things, to go back to them and do another additional round of review. And if you have any kind of direction you want to provide staff for further research or adding things to the draft plan. I do want to make a note that every time I read through the draft plan, I find one more thing I want to just update and tweak, whether it's a grammatical issue or a picture. So it's still somewhat a work in progress as far as catching a few things. So we welcome feedback. We welcome going back and having further discussion on this topic. For background, the Commission on Equity has been a part of this process, like I mentioned, for a very long time. At their latest meeting, which was happened on June 24th, they did actually recommend to bring forward the draft as it is right now for the City Council to take a review and to adopt moving forward. But like I mentioned, there could be other items that this council wants the Commission on Equity to consider, and certainly you could send it back, you all could send it back to the Commission on Equity for further review. So the purpose of the plan, and I've tried to denote the page numbers at which all of this starts. I've also brought a couple of hard copies, just 2 of them, so you'll have to share, just so you can kind of see the plan in its totality, in addition to it being online. The purpose of the plan is to create a strategic guide for the city to advance and support equity efforts in the greater Lacey community. I think one thing I want to point out about the plan is it's not meant to be extremely prescriptive. There are times where it does note certain items, but really the process is meant to be agile and adaptive, recognizing that things do change. And maybe as we're working through the strategic plan, we find something works really well, and maybe something isn't working and we need to go back and we need to reevaluate it, or new information comes to light. And we want to make sure that we are able to think about that in terms of providing greater equity in the community. This plan aligns with a lot of elements in the city work plan and the city's strategic plan. I know the council obviously had a council retreat and we're working through this, so I'm talking about the existing one. But as you can see, a vibrant place to live and work, it ties into social services, an engaged community. There's a goal about communication and engagement, quality transportation infrastructure. It talks about, having transportation and access for all and improving, multimodal transportation as one example. Environmental stewardship, it talks about environmental justice and continuing environmental efforts. Excellence in programs and services, it talks about, retaining and attracting qualified staff and having staff, being reflective of our community. How the plan was developed, like I have already kind of mentioned, this has been a long time in the making. It has been taking over the course of 3 years. We started to work on this plan with the Commission on Equity back in 2021. And I think it's really important to recognize the Commission on Equity was created by this body for the purpose of advancing opportunities to create a more welcoming community, continuing critical conversations on race and equity, seeking greater participation from underrepresented community members, and identifying existing gaps and barriers which could prevent full participation in government and public policy. As part of this task, the Commission has a duty and responsibility to create policy recommendations, provide data analysis, and address issues related to equity and inclusion, amongst other things. So the Commission on Equity was formed back in 2021 in January, and we held our first meeting, I believe it was in June, and started working on just the idea of a plan later that year. And during the kind of initial inception of the Commission on Equity, they got a lot of presentations from city staff. So various departments came and talked a lot about, what they did, what kind of services they provided, and what kind of equity work that they were already engaged in. And I do think it's important to highlight, and as you'll see in some of our baselines later on in the plan, that the city is engaged currently in a lot of equity and inclusion work. And so our departments are really doing a great job. And the plan is really to help think about the future and what we want to continue to see and enhance moving forward. They also learned about processes and procedures used in local government. So just how local government works and functions with other local governments here in Washington State. And then also started working on city policy and program recommendations. And I'm not going to go through the entire list, it's all here. But the Commission on Equity has seen a lot of policy documents that have made its way up to the city council at this point in time. So the plan itself, I've already talked about, the formation of the Commission on Equity. So this is a kind of simplified roadmap to its development. So the Commission on Equity said, before we do anything, it would be really good for us to hear from the public and to engage with the public and understand what's going on, in addition to building on our understanding from what we're hearing from city staff and city departments. And so they held a couple of community engagement sessions. These were open to the public. It was a 2-day event where community members could come here to City Hall and provide and engage feedback. There was also an online survey where we had hundreds of survey takers take the survey and provided us information that way. So that way we were accessible in person as well as online. Like I mentioned, there was an introduction to city departments and city policies. And then moving to 3, the Commission on Equity worked on the diversity, equity, inclusion, strategic belonging strategic plan for 21 public meetings. I'm just going to go plan. 21 public meetings over the course of 3 years. And during those 21 public meetings, what they were doing, we were talking about, policy ideas, vetting it through the executive team, through city staff, going and hosting more community engagement, such as our community forums, and then integrating and thinking about those concepts with the materials that had been created and creating more materials. So you can see it went through review with the executive team and other city staff. That feedback was then reviewed by the Commission on Equity, and that went through several rounds and several different elements of the plan. At the same time, in number 6, they continued to engage the community. And then through all of that, after 21 meetings, had a draft plan, and that's what we're here looking at today. With the idea that we're reviewing it tonight, and like I mentioned early on, we can review it as many times as this council needs moving forward. And then hopefully sometime in the future, having it be adopted by the city council. So when I talk about the 21 public meetings, we have this provided actually as one of the appendices where anybody can go back and watch all 21 of these meetings and catch the conversations. But you can see each and every one, what was discussed during those meetings and how the Commission on Equity worked and engaged through those materials. Speaking of engagement, just to highlight what was done with engagement, we had the community engagement sessions, like I mentioned. We've also held community forums. So between 2023 and 2024, the Commission on Equity with the city has held 4 community engagement events. This has included the Black and African American, LGBTQIA+, immigrant voices, and all abilities community forums. We've also held focus groups to include meeting with the Lacey Youth Council, Senior Services for the South Sound. The Commission on Equity has received feedback at community events. So they have been at the Lacey Cultural Celebration for the past 3 years, getting input from the community. They've also been at the Juneteenth celebration for 2 years, also collecting feedback. There was our Lacey Cares survey back in 2021, which also asked questions about equity. And so we were able to grab some information and feedback from the community through that. And then also partner events. So the city and the Commission on Equity has participated with our partners here in Thurston County at events like our Thurston County League of Women Voters Equity Panel. So with all of that community input, what we have put here in the plan is a very high level assessment of it. We don't have anybody's, we have some verbatim quotes, but it's really just a synthesis of these ideas. And so what you can see, we have this divided currently in the plan based on what the Commission on Equity was tasked with. So the first question here is all of the feedback we got on how to create a more welcoming community. And you can see, again, this is not verbatim, this is an analysis of all of the comments, but we do have a couple of quotes that we did receive through various engagement events. And then in one of our appendices, we actually provide additional notes from all of our engagement events too for community members to read and look through as well. We've collected information on racism and inequities in the community and what concerns that individuals have. You can see a full list here, and just to kind of go over a few of them, and I'll take a step back and just go over a few of the previous ones as well. As far as creating a welcoming community, so what we heard was work with other partner entities out in the community and organizations. The city can't do this alone. We need to do this in partnership. Expand volunteer opportunities. Visualizations in the community really matter. Having representations really help demonstrate that the city is welcoming for all. That includes landmarks and other types of representations. It includes events and to continue collaborations, like I mentioned, create places where people feel comfortable and they feel included and they feel like they belong. And help provide tools to improve in-person conversations. So not only host the conversations, but be a helpful facilitator for those types of conversations in the community. We also heard involving more voices of all abilities and more perspectives, and creating a one-stop place and resource for community members to get information. For racism and equity, we heard about the continued impacts of historical legacies on the community, such as redlining and restrictive covenants, which we'll talk about here in just a second. How there are still disparities in things like hiring practices, in healthcare, in representation, whether it's at government staff or at but school staff, et cetera. The justice system and employment and real estate. Having language access be limited is a form of inequity and a barrier. So I heard the conversation earlier when we were talking about the emergency management plan and translation services. The information on languages is part of our demographics and who we are as a community, of kind of the breakdown of what languages are spoken at home outside of English. Providing more ways to get information out, increase public safety, talking about housing challenges just in general being one of the biggest inequities in the community. So a lot of great feedback on concerns about racism and inequity. For participation, for increasing participation from underserved community members, we heard, hey, you gotta really find where the gaps are first and foremost, and then try very intentionally to find ways to connect and fill those gaps. And specifically, what we heard several times throughout the engagement is this idea of making sure that you have trusted messengers in the community. So people who you can connect with, who other community members naturally connect with and can pass through and disseminate information and ideas, and even two-way conversations and thoughts. We also heard, go to where the people are. Don't be here at just City Hall, but you have to go out and you have to engage individuals out in the community where they're naturally going to be congregating. So a lot of great information, as you can see also here, provide information in multiple languages. And that kind of goes right back to that point of translating for the emergency management plan. We asked about barriers seen or experienced or in participating in decisions that impact the community. There was discussion about cultural barriers being a challenge, that negotiating government systems can be very challenging, especially when there are multiple governments just here locally, as well as on the state level, different departments, and then also federal government programs such as like Medicare and Medicaid can be really challenging to navigate. To host youth and child-friendly events, that lack of childcare and timing of meetings can be barriers to participation, as well as only having in-person events or meetings. So we heard a lot of good feedback on what were barriers. So with all of that community engagement, that was kind of the foundation of creating this plan and continued to be integral as we continued through this process. Something else that was really important was establishing shared definitions for the equity plan. And so the Commission on Equity decided very early on to adopt the OFM glossary. So this is the Office of Financial Management has done a great job of putting together a DEIB glossary. And so they are in the plan, you'll see that the whole glossary is included as part of Appendix A, but you also see that key terms from that glossary are interwoven through certain sections of the plan itself. So I'm gonna turn it over to Veronica, and Veronica is gonna go over a couple of really key definitions. You're clicking there, right? Just this one. Okay.
So we're just gonna go, and we probably already know what diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is, but we're just gonna go very quickly through a very simple definition. So, and it's like Shannon mentioned, again, the definition from the Office of Financial Management. So in terms of diversity, it just talks about people and the differences between the people in the systems. The people are considered as individuals, but they have differences that make rich experiences. So it's groups in the diversity of a collective of a group in their relationship between themselves. That's really diversity. As an example, we have that it could be a difference in cultures, in sex, in gender, beliefs, things like that. That's diversity. In terms of equity, it's the act of developing and strengthening and supporting and creating procedures to support a framework where we can go and create outcomes and systems that provide access to everybody. So we have this example here from Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and it's differentiating between equity and equality. So in equity, it's everybody having the access to according to their particular needs. So instead of having, for example, here, a same bicycle for everybody, they have the specific bicycle to their needs. So that's really what equity is, providing the service and going to where the person needs it, exactly what they need.
One of the things that the, Commission on Equity, when we were going through these definitions and giving these examples, the Commission on Equity was like, these are really great definitions. And this illustration, for example, of the writers is a really good illustration. However, we want to make sure that we are actually talking about inequities and giving examples, real world examples. And so as part of the process, we added a definition and kind of overview and background on what redlining is and the continued impacts that it has across America, as well as Washington State on communities here moving forward. And so in the next couple of pages in the plan, it provides just the brief history of what it is. And it also talks about disparities in home ownerships and how, if you look at disparities in home ownerships, it's actually grown since the 1960s. The 1968, Home Fairness Act went into effect, and yet what we're seeing is we're actually seeing greater disparities based on, in part, some of these inequities continuing through the landscapes of America. So in addition to redlining, we also added So in addition to redlining, the commission also recommended adding something that was really local. So recognizing that there were redlining maps here in Washington State, and you can get access to the maps in Seattle and Tacoma, but talking about Thurston County specifically, we recognize that those maps likely led to geographies of individuals, especially Black and people of color, moving here to Thurston County because they couldn't get housing in Tacoma or Seattle. We also turned our attention to providing an example here locally of racially restricted covenants, which had been in many divisions throughout Thurston County. And so providing an example of what those looked like and how they are no longer effective, but could still exist in documentation, and that the auditor's office here in Thurston County has a program to remove that language.
None of this was even happening in Thurston County, because one of the reasons that we are the most diverse community in Thurston County is because we didn't have some of the restrictions.
Right.
You know, I've had some, late Virgil Clarkson had some just amazing stories about this in the background of some of this.
Yeah, you had to move to Lacey.
And there's a effort several years ago where it identified some of these restrictive covenants, and the county did a search to try to start removing that. And that's what set up the auditor's office, to set up a process. And
Didn't we find, I
We were
remember
briefed on that.
something that we had one, I forget where it was, but wasn't there a neighborhood that was out?
it was just outside in the unincorporated growth area.
Oh, okay.
There's beach grass there.
Yeah, I remember when we looked at
Was it
that.
beach?
And there is a map online where you can actually pull up all of the ones that they have found to date, so you can see all of the former communities. But your point is a really good one, Councilmember, where the legacy here is still impacting what our community looks like today.
Found, removed, and re-recorded.
For removing the covenants, the racially
Yeah.
restrictive covenants, yes.
Is part of this plan trying to identify areas that we still have inequities? 'Cause I'm a big statistics guy, so I mean, there's a lot of information here, but what, are there actually areas in our city there where there is still in our government, there's still inequity? I know the chief and deputy presented their statistics for their hiring, which were really good. So are we using this to identify areas where we still have those issues?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you'll see in some of our appendixes, we actually do look at our application data. We look at our current employment data. We look at our advisory board data. We look at our community surveys and who we're hearing from, who we're not hearing from. And I think, again, focusing back on the comment about languages and being able to access information in something that is your preferred language or maybe your only language, and being able to get communication in those ways. So yes, I think there are certain things that we've identified as areas that we need to look more into.
And what's really nice about this work, it's really good work, is that it sets a baseline so that we can also track going forward.
Yeah, that's what people need to see, individual stories are individual and they're terrible, but they need to see what work we are doing and what our city looks like to enable to build trust and move forward and have those trusted leaders go out and talk to people.
Yeah, one of the things as you guys were talking, I was thinking about, we've seen, we've got the Juneteenth celebration, the Asian Pacific Islander celebration, even though that's in Tacoma more here than here. The Polyfest celebration. What I have not seen is the Latino community in any way. Is there an engagement issue there? Or is there something we can?
Certainly one of the gaps we've identified, and I'll just use the example of our advisory boards, right? So we went through the process of surveying the demographics on our advisory boards, and we found that we had one individual out of 50 individuals who identified as Hispanic or Latino. And so certainly, when you look at the population of the city of Lacey, where it's 12%, we're missing some perspectives and some voices. And so we need to figure out ways that we can connect and communicate. And so those are some of thinking about language access, thinking about meeting people, thinking about trusted messengers. Those are some of the ideas to try to bridge those gaps.
Okay, so that has been identified.
I
Go
have
ahead.
something that I can add. I reached out and I met with the executive director for the Commission for Hispanic Affairs. And we're exploring the possibility of organizing a community forum with them. They already agreed to do it. So we're gonna start doing that. There is a challenge with the Hispanic community, and it's not just in the city, even with the state, like for example, with the business resource groups. There's different business resource groups for people with disabilities, veterans, immigrants. There's one for Latinos, and they are the ones that struggle the most in terms of membership, support, volunteering. Culturally, the Latinos are not used to speak up or participate very actively, the way that I guess Spain colonized Latin America was suppressing that voice. And Latinos in general usually afraid to speak up because they've suffered a lot of consequences. So it takes an additional or extra effort to
Trust.
I think there's Latino community is extraordinarily diverse, even, and so there's not always, it's not just one group, one country, and so trying to figure out how to coordinate, get everyone on board, but that's something I've been pushing for since before I was even on council. I think it's something that an event for the Hispanic community would be enormous, and I think it'd be extremely popular, just like the other events that we do.
Yeah, cause I mean, I go to the Latino store over here and get all the good stuff and I see the food trucks and I see, and I see the workers and I'm like, well, where's their civic presence? Why aren't they engaging at the level that some of the other groups are?
And you see it in the country too. It's very difficult to involve the citizens inside the country to participate and to speak up. It's been it was for 35 years, the same political party. Nobody could do anything to change. It's very, very difficult. People don't have a voice. And I can talk about Mexico because that's my country. But I think I see similar things happened in Cuba, in Venezuela. And so it's really, if we're gonna work with the Latino community, I think we have to gain their trust and empower them.
One of the other things
We're
that
gonna have to reach out versus waiting for them to come.
Exactly.
So that's the
We're
step
gonna have to be
one.
more proactive, yes.
So one of the other things I was thinking about when you were doing this is representation matters. And it doesn't matter how you slice it, you can't, so when I see the artwork around the city, right? I don't see enough representation in the artwork, the little girl when you drive into the city or some of the other things, I see a little bit of native artwork. I don't see any Mexican or Latino artwork. I don't see any Samoan artwork. And I think those things can make a difference to our residents who see them and feel honored by seeing, that we as a city have artwork that honors their heritage, as opposed to just our own or whatever the case may be. And so I'd really like to see us implement into, our art program, other people's cultures so that they know that we are thinking of them. And maybe that will foster and facilitate some more engagement from those groups if they see that, the sign at the rack has, some Korean art features to it or something along those lines. When we, in our development portion, I don't think we have truly any standard that says we need to be culturally diverse in some of the development areas. Maybe, we can't be diverse in form-based code, but maybe we can in some of the art that goes and some of the aesthetics that go along with our building and our art.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And again, that's something we heard, directly in the community engagement and something that the Commission on Equity talked about a lot. And so when we were looking at one of the goal areas, we do focus on acknowledgements and events. So I think it speaks to both of the things that you've brought up here. And it talks about, again, kind of having additional representation in things like art and events here in the community. And so here in a couple of weeks, the council will actually get an opportunity to review a utility wrap project that we're doing where we're highlighting voices from around the community. And so we're hoping that's one step, but I think again, that is one of the goals that we've identified and strategies in the plan of increasing representation across the community in a multitude of ways. So I know we have a couple more definitions here, but
Thank you on the wrap. Such a good idea.
I'm very excited about them.
Yes.
So a few more definitions.
Yeah, we have inclusion. It's intentionally ensuring opportunities that are meaningful and that include the participation of everybody. As an example, we have gaps in the voices, but we want to empower people to talk and what we were just talking about, and to help them see that what they say matters, that they can safely speak up and that we will take into consideration what they want to say. An example of doing this in the community, which is what we're just talking about, is intentionally consulting and involving the collaboration of the community. and encouraging to participate and include them in our outreach efforts. For last, we have belonging. It's being considered, supported, respected, and valued as your authentic self. And it includes also knowing that you're safe to be who you really are and that you are worth for who you are. And it's not here, but we had a training when I was working for the state where they gave us some statistics, and one that I was super impressed is that when people feel that they belong, they're 300% more productive, which is a huge, huge difference. Thank you.
Thank you. So like I mentioned, other definitions are included with the OFM glossary. It's in the appendix, Appendix A. And in addition to that, the Commission on Equity also added a few definitions that they thought were really important that the glossary didn't necessarily have. And that includes a definition for BIPOC, which is an acronym that stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. Also added a little bit more to just what people of color. There is a slight definition in the OFM glossary, but they added a couple more definitions. And then also on restorative justice, they wanted to make sure that they had a definition for that. And then also accountability. And accountability is something that was really central to the Commission on Equity's process. They wanted to make sure, and I think, Councilmember Dunning, you brought this up, right? That we have some way to report back on what we're doing and, making sure that we're being transparent in our actions, but also that we're reviewing them, like I mentioned earlier, to make sure that they're actually working the way we think that they should, they're not causing more harm, and that we evaluate and change them if they aren't working moving forward. So being, again, that agile and adaptive. So other elements of the plan, this provides a whole table of contents. I'm not going to go through every single one because we are going to go through sections of them, but just note that there are several sections in here that we might not touch on tonight, but certainly if you have questions, please let me know. We have an introduction. It talks about the purpose of the plan. It talks about what's in the plan. So we have the overarching plan, and this plan itself is, a subset of city plans. So you have, your comprehensive plan and your ultimate strategic plan, and this is within it. But we also hope that elements of this plan align and get infused with other plans here across the city. So you've got the plan, you have a vision, you have a mission, you have values, and then there were 4 goal areas. When we started this process, we had about 50 things that we wanted to look at, and it was whittled down to 4 goals that have sub areas within each of these goals. So the first goal is workforce and work environment. The second goal is community access and engagement. The third is policy programs and services. And then the fourth is livability. The plan includes a message from the Commission on Equity, just talking about the process and why this plan was so important to them. We also have a placeholder currently for a message from the City Council. And so one of the things we want to do, whether it's tonight or at a future session, is just get some feedback on what you all would like included so we can come back and review that in a future draft. And we have what this plan is and what this plan is not. And so like I mentioned earlier, when we started this presentation, it's not meant to be prescriptive. It's meant to give ideas and direction. So when we talk about the plan itself, it's not to address or answer all equity efforts in the community. It's taking a look at, what we think we need to look at currently based on all of the information that we have now, and what might be some areas of focus and some strategies to accomplishing that, and some ways that we can be accountable to the community moving forward. So you have your vision, which is to provide a direction of where we're headed, the mission of how we're going to get to that vision, the values of how we're going to act to get to accomplishing that mission to achieve the vision, and then the goals in the sub areas, which are broad objectives to help accomplish and support the mission and vision. The strategies are an approach, how to approach the goals. And then benchmarks are a way to report back to the community as well as the council and the Commission on Equity and staff on what is being done. And this is helped and supported by benchmarks. Those are the benchmarks. And I want to just point out on the benchmarks that really importantly, it's not a pass-fail system. It's what have we done, right? And what kind of impact did it have, and how might we need to change and look at different things moving forward? So the mission and the vision, so the vision is the city of Lacey is an inclusive community that embraces the gifts, talents, experiences, and contributions of all community members and works collaboratively, internally and externally to advance equity in Lacey. Lacey is a community where change starts by listening, diversity is celebrated, actions are aligned with values, opportunities are equitable, partnerships are cultivated, barriers to full participation are eliminated, and accountability is central to achieving the above. So you can see again, accountability will come up several times throughout this process. The mission talks about how the city is committed to delivering exceptional public services, policies, and programs that integrate equity and social justice as core principles as we continue to grow as a vibrant and thriving community. And that the city is committed to working collaboratively with community partners to help create equitable access to opportunities and resources for all community members. The values go into a little bit more detail, so I'm not going to read them all here for you tonight, but I think the important things is that championing social change that leads to more equitable society for all community members, eradicating all forms of racism and oppression, recognizing that city government has the power to impact lives of our community, and that we're beginning with ourselves. So I think, I heard with, the emergency plan, right, that we need to focus internally as well as focus externally. And so the work needs to be done in both places, but we need to make sure, our policies and programs are in a good place. And then we need to partner and advocate with our community members moving forward for other changes across the community. And again, being committed to working collaboratively with community partners. Like I just mentioned in that last part, what we really identified through this process was that there are three main areas where the city can play a role. And the first one is the city can be a leader. So like I mentioned, our own internal policies and procedures can be a frontline leader of change. The city can also be a partner. So when it collaborates with another entity or an organization, and I'll use the Fred U. Harris Lodge is a really great example of this. They had been doing the Juneteenth celebration in the community for 40 years before the city got involved. And when we did, we said, hey, we just really want to be a partner and a collaborator. This is still your event. You all have done so much work to get this to where it is. Let us help and partner with that. And then the third one is an advocate. So maybe you're not directly working with an organization, but you are advocating for an idea or a principle across the community. And I use the example of, state laws that impact the community, where again, the city doesn't have a direct role other than using its voice. So in the goals in the sub areas, each one has multiple sub areas. So with workforce and work environment, there are three. It's equity plan, hiring and retention, development and workplace. For community access and engagement, it's communications, engagement, relationships, and collaboration. For policy programs and services, it's city policies, city services, public safety, parks, culture, recreation, infrastructure, utilities, acknowledgements, and events, which back to that goal area and strategy that we were talking about before about representation and increasing representation in the community. Contracting, and then finally in livability. Livability was one of the goal areas where it's like, let's throw all of the kind of remaining items in there because they all impact quality of life. And so we've got economic development, housing, social services, partnerships, and environment. And what you can see on the right-hand column, what we've tried to identify to the best degree possible, although this changes kind of specific to the program, is what the city's role is. So are we the lead? So when we're talking about our workforce and work environment, yes, the city is the lead. The city's got the control over that. It might at some point need to be an advocate. Maybe there is a employment state law that we need to, use the voice for, but as most part, it is the leader. For our own communications, access and engagement, we can be the leader, but we also might need a partner and be an advocate. For policies and programs and services, this looks internally specifically. Again, the city is the leader. And then in livability, it could be all three. It could be a leader, partner, and an advocate. Within each of the goals, you can see strategies for each sub area, and this really kind of identifies, again, kind of how we might accomplish moving forward within the sub area of that goal, and then what the city's role would be. So I won't read all of these, but just want to highlight what's in there as part of the plan. You can see we've done that for each one of our goal areas and sub areas. Like I mentioned, accountability was a really big piece of this. And so what's in the plan right now is a commitment to an annual report out on the equity efforts that the city undertakes throughout the year, and to provide a status report based on 4 areas. So it would receive a status area based on a sub area of the plan of successful, meaning that most or all strategy benchmarks are actively being practiced or completed. Significant progress, which means many strategy benchmarks are being developed or actively being implemented. Progress, meaning several strategies or benchmarks are being developed or actively being implemented or practices. And then emerging, meaning that little or no strategies or benchmarks have started to take place. The plan also includes who we are, so some demographics, just a quick snapshot. A lot of this is focused on residents because that is what we have the most immediate access to through the census. I will note that some of the census information that we have available is a little bit dated, and I'll use the example of business data. The last business data that we have dates back to 2017 from the Census Bureau. In addition to the demographics, we've also got a deeper dive into the goals and the sub areas. It provides definitions for key terms that are relevant to that particular goal. It also provides some additional information that, the Commission on Equity thought would be helpful for, community members, city staff, to take a look through. The strategies, benchmarks, what the city's role are, what department roles are, what the current status is, and then what the baselines were for 2022. So I've got a couple of just printouts of sections of the plan. So there are more than enough here, but these are just to kind of show what the benchmarks and the baselines look like specifically. So over on the right-hand side, just to provide an example, you've got the equity plan and you've got the strategy, and underneath that strategy, you've got 2 benchmarks. Those 2 benchmarks will show up in the further dive into the benchmarks and the baselines. And the purpose of the baseline is just to report on where we're at here in 2024. What is the current status? And so for the example that I'm using up here, I'll use the second one, which is adopt a workforce equity plan and implement the plan across departments. This is within the workforce and the work environment. And you can see in 2024, what we have is there is no plan to date. And there's no implementation at this time because there is no plan. So it's really just giving a, hey, here's where we're at. And so we've done that with all of the strategies throughout the plan. And as you can see, I'm going to go through these pretty briefly. There are a lot of strategies throughout this plan. So there is a lot of information included in here about all of the great work that the city is currently doing across these goal areas. So I know that's a lot of information. There is even more information in the appendices. And I do just want to quickly point out what you can find in the appendices. So in addition to that OFM glossary, you can also find some of the deep dives into the data that we were talking about, Councilmember Dunning. So you can take a look at what our current application kind of base was for the year comparative to our city population. I do want to make a note though, in these analyses, we can only use the data that we have available now, which may not be the most refined data possible. So we work through third-party systems. And so in some cases, we are kind of held to what they can collect. And then also sometimes with our own systems, what maybe we've been collecting for, several years, if not decades. And so we're reporting out what we have right now. That doesn't mean that in the future, we might not want to take a look at it and really finesse the system for even better metrics moving forward. But there are Appendix D is on applicant and staff data. So you could take a look at a snapshot right now of what kind of applications we're seeing come in and what our workforce is. And our workforce, you can take a look at it broken down by race, by ethnicity, by sex, and then also duration with the city. So there's some really good information and data in there. We also provided the information on the advisory board stipend program that we went over with council, just again, kind of showing where we currently are. And both of these tie directly into some of the strategies that we have under sub areas under workforce and work environment. We also take a look at our engagement activities and show, what kind of voices we have been hearing to this point through engagement, things like surveys, because we have a lot of good demographic data through that and who we're not hearing from through surveys. In addition to that, we just provided some more information on how many non-city of Lacey initiated events that are attended, and that's part of one of the strategies to attend more non-city initiated events. How often we use our language line interpretation services, and this is a service where individuals can, receive services here at the city by their preferred language, by letting us know which language they would like to have translation services in. What our existing pedestrian network and bicycle network is, a heat map throughout the community, the Washington Environmental Health Disparities Map for the city of Lacey, and then also the in-depth dive through the community forum notes and other engagement notes that we heard. So those are all of the appendices. And like I mentioned, one of the things we'd love to hear a little bit more from you all is some feedback on what we can put here in the message for the city council. And also answer any questions you might have about the draft as it currently is.
It's really impressive, very impressive. A lot of work goes into this, and Annie is here representing the Commission on Equity, and she's a friend and neighbor, and I'm so glad that you're very proud of it. Yeah. I mean,
Done a really good work here. I did notice as going through it, though, and I'm not an editor, but there are a lot of grammatical and spelling and things like that I noticed. And that definitely would need to be cleaned up before the final document, I would think.
Yep, we are actively working on it, and part of the
I caught
process.
quite a few as I was going through, and that's something you do a lot more of, I know, but not my thing.
Yeah, and part of that process, and I gotta do a shout out to Donna Feliciana, our communication specialist, because she really put the visualizations together. And some of that too is our translating it between the Word document and the editor document. And so she has worked countless hours on this, so I do wanna just do a shout out to her for all of those efforts. And we will continue to go through and try to catch as many things as possible.
Yeah. As usual, your presentation is full and robust. I like it. I'm hoping that the report that you were talking about, what benchmarks we are reaching and what we've set, and maybe we can see that on an annual or quarterly or something along those lines. I think that'll help the council track if we're reaching benchmarks that are set by the commission. The statistics are great because a lot of us really like to see the numbers, and it looks like, in terms of demographics for ethnic demographics for residents here, when it comes to the state and the county and the city, we beat the average, except for on the Native American one. So people would rather live here, it seems. But one of my fears with Lacey has always been, our build out and our, I don't want us to become some exclusive community that people can't afford to live here. Right? So the housing part is really important. And as we, start to expand, heading, east, and absorbing some UGA, I know we can't make assurances that we'll be able to use that area and make sure that it doesn't become some, overpriced area, but it's a big concern. Because again, we turn away a lot more people than most of us probably realize and know. Sorry, you can't afford to live here because you can't afford to spend $450,000 or higher on a house. And so it becomes a big concern. And so that is one of those areas where it's like, I know that, in some of this, the commission on equity is gonna have to get involved in some of our zoning, which, neighborhood commercial already is, right? Because that was run through the commission on equity. But in some of our annexation planning as well. That was all I could think of at the time. I appreciate what you've done, and I'll be honest, I did not have time to go through all 260 pages. Okay, I worked through it. But you did give us the short and condensed version on that. I think it was like 6 pages, and I appreciated that. But you've done a lot here. More than I can I'll spend some time going through it. But I'm hoping that through this, we get some of those underrepresented communities that don't speak up very much, who to come to the front, and because I see them and, I patronize their businesses. But when we do have, when the city gets together, I don't see them as much as I would like. And that it's sad to me. So even if that means that, yes, we will help this group of people get a cricket pitch, and this group of people do this or that or the other thing, and maybe, do you remember when the Polyfest people came and said, hey, can you guys donate the space at the rack just this one year and, give us a break on the pricing, and we may have to do some of those things to really get these people to engage, to help people to honor and recognize their culture. I don't mind doing that, but your work here does show us where some of the gaps and holes are that you're trying to fill. And I'm hoping that this mission statement that you want, that you're hoping for, that we can get together our next work session, workshop that together, so that we can come up with a cohesive statement, if you guys are all right with that. I don't think it should be something that's done on the fly. I think we can, in the next 2 weeks, we can maybe come with some ideas to our next work session on that piece.
In recognition that this plan took 3 years to develop, I feel like we should put some thought into
Okay.
it, say at the front of it.
Well, and there's some time, we can schedule some time, a work session to work on the vision statement. And there's, as Shannon mentioned, there's still some finalizing and formatting of the document. So there's some time before the document comes back for full action by council. But we can work that in and develop that vision statement.
Just a point of clarification, we're talking about the council message, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And Deputy Mayor, I did want to point out, when I gave the example of the baselines, the benchmarks and the baselines, I gave one that didn't have a lot of information, but in the packets that I just passed out, you'll notice that there are paragraphs under some of those strategies where, again, the city is doing excellent work in some of these areas. And so I do want to highlight what our departments are doing. I also just want to say thank you to our department directors and their staff for providing all the input and the feedback. This went to our directors and they reviewed it, several iterations. And so a lot of hard work and effort went on their end. In addition to the Commission on Equity, I also want to just do a thank you to the Civics Leader Forum. This was the precursor to the Commission on Equity that helped really establish the Commission on Equity. So a lot of work has, led to this point in this process, and a lot of work still has to be done.
So when I was talking about the artwork and the honoring and the statues and signs and stuff like that, and okay, so yeah, if we wrap a box and we, honor somebody's culture with that wrap, that's a temporary thing, right? Because we don't wrap boxes permanently, right?
No, they last around 5 to 7 years.
5 to 7 years. Okay, so I'm
They
thinking
last that long.
that's pretty cool, but I'm thinking something more permanent.
Good investment.
Yep. No, but I
like
think
this total pull that we have out here, right? It's gonna last more than 5 to 7 years. And so I want the community to really see that etched in stone or bronzed or whatever, that we see you, we recognize you, you're part of our community, we honor your culture. And this is, just like we were able to.
Including you.
We're including you, right, permanently, not just temporarily on a box. Yeah, because you belong here. And I'm probably gonna push that more than once.
I think that's where the belonging is, to me, the most important. So I'm a numbers guy, which is why the benchmarks and the statistics mean a lot to me. But we can make sure that we're hitting, we look exactly like our demographics, all this stuff. But if those people don't feel the belonging in our community, and this is why, me and Malcolm both talked about the Hispanic, if people don't see it, if they don't see these things, well, of course they're gonna feel like we're not doing, we don't represent, we don't do enough of these things. So we really do have to figure out how we can make sure that people see and know that at least Lacey is doing these things and they can see it every day, even if it's just driving by a piece of art or doing something that makes them feel the belonging to the community.
Immediately, I thought of the baseball diamonds at the back, the back of the baseball diamond, you know what I mean? And that there's just that wood there that could be, there's canvases everywhere.
Yeah, we can come up, I think if we really dive into it, we can come up with a million things to.
Right.
And we just have to turn that switch on and say, let's look for where these opportunities exist.
And I think that's these are all really good examples, right, of how some of these strategies could come into play. So I'll just point out under community access and engagement, the strategy, the sub-area is relationships, and the strategy is enhanced relationships and opportunities in the community for continued dialogue and knowledge sharing among the city partner entities and community members through events, programs, forums, art, et cetera. So the ideas that you're coming up with, these are, again, like those are action items and things we'd love in a future baseline, to report out. But we did hear that from the community and from the Commission on Equity. So that is certainly part of the plan to be thinking like that.
I think we're off to a really good start here. Thank you for all this, please.
I wanted to say, I really appreciate the data, as others have said. It's clear we have some underrepresentation of certain populations that exist in Lacey that aren't represented very well in our city staff. Like the 330 people that we have working for this Lacey, we have significant gaps, and the data makes it very clear. And so I'm glad that that is made visible by this plan, and that we have this space where we're gonna be emerging, where we're gonna be working on a work plan to increase representation. And Councilmember Dunning is right, like surface representation is not the whole thing. Like you're not done once you attain like comparable representation, but it is a good start, right? Our communities seeing themselves represented in the staff of Lacey helps to build that trust that we're trying to build. It's part of how we show people that they belong. So that's important, and I'm glad that we made it so visible in the plan right up front. And I look forward to how we're going to work to close those gaps. I wanted to say, it took 3 years to develop this, but if it's a comfort, I think it took about 2 years just for OFM to develop the glossary and definitions. So like it was 2019 to 2020 and to 2020 before I think they had solid definitions. And so you took those and you built something extremely comprehensive and almost just as quickly. I think the speedometer visualization that you chose is really great because it's very easy for people to look at and understand. Like this is a very detailed, comprehensive plan, but I can glance at this, like where we start is emerging in this area. And then when we get the annual plan, I'm assuming we're gonna have that same graphic and it's gonna say either we're still emerging or we've made some kind of progress. So that's a really quick, easy visualization for like, how are we doing? And my question, none of those were questions, I guess. Are we going to post this online? And how are we gonna do that in a way that is accessible for folks? Because that's a whole nother, probably a whole nother project, is making this accessible to folks that want to know what Lacey's doing on equity.
No, I think it's a great question. And, the idea would be that, yes, this is absolutely in its finalized form. If the council adopts it, would go online, and we can have, 2 formats of it too, where we have our kind of very decorated rendition, and then also like a plain text rendition as well to make sure that we have
Screen reader
accessibility.
capabilities, but also
Condensed, yes, yes.
yeah, summarize.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Executive summary.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Having a web page that really clearly shows, to your point, maybe just where the statuses are for the different ideas and you can read. So somebody can quickly pick it up.
Thank you.
Those would be translated as well.
Right now, we're at 160 languages that you can translate into from the city website.
160 plus, I think it's maybe 167, don't quote me on that exact number, but it is certainly that. And we were talking about language access, and I know, those are things that we're gonna be working on, and something that's called out here in the plan as part of the community access and engagement is to really fine tune a plan and start working towards that, you know, language translation, accessibility of certain documents, et cetera.
Thank you.
Okay, well, with that, we have reached the end of our agenda. Thank you so much for this incredible piece of work. Does anybody have anything else for the good of the order?
Deputy Mayor, if I could just one more thing.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
It sounds like the council wants to come back and think about the message after maybe digesting this and maybe coming up with some other thoughts. So it looks like August 13th might be a really good date to do that. So is that the direction from the council?
It is.
Do you want us to do the council piece, man?
Yeah, sit down.
Did you have a thought of a deadline in mind for this before you brought it to this meeting today?
Yeah, you know, it depended on how this conversation went,
Okay.
Deputy Mayor.
Okay, so if we can put this on the work session for August, and hopefully by then we can all, you know,
I'll bring some thoughts.
we bring some thoughts, I'll write some down. And maybe on that night, we can spend enough time to put something cohesive together, something that would be, you know, that would fit in this document. And then bring it to the full council for implementation for resolution. Everybody's good with that? All right.
Thank you, council members.
Thank you.
Okay, well, with that, we've reached the end of our agenda. If there is nothing further and no objection, I will call this work session adjourned.